G'day, folks. Today we are chatting with Pete Trott of On Trot fame. Pete's just returned from a trip over to the US. He's going to tell you all about that in a moment. Unlike the 10 minutes that he just told me all about it, where I forgot to hit record. So we've got sorry, Pete. So we've had a little bit of practice. Yeah, Pete, please tell us about your trip and why you were over there, and the floor's yours.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I was lucky enough to receive a Churchill Fellowship back in 2023. And so I travelled at the start of April this year and had a 6-week trip where I visited makers around the US. Yeah, so that was an incredible experience, and I can't thank the Churchill Trust enough. They've been absolutely amazing in supporting me, on that trip. So yeah, so I started off. I wanted to visit a couple of Windsor chair makers. I'm sure if people know what I make as tools, I make draw knives and scorps, which is focused on Windsor chair makers. So I visited Greg Pennington in Nashville and also Curtis Buchanan. And they're not tool makers in any way. They're strictly chair makers, but they were two people that, focus and deal with these hand tools on a daily basis. That's their sort of bread and butter. So they were really amazing people to visit and, try and get a bit of the knowledge that they have and understanding that they have about the tools that they use. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, so that was really good. And it was a way, they have beautiful workshops that are full of hand tools that they've collected over the years. Greg Pennington especially has got tools from every maker in the world, sitting in his workshop. So it was a chance to get in there and spend a couple of days trialing all of these different hand tools and sort of talking about the nuances of them, which elements of them worked, which bits possibly didn't, and what could be done about that. Yeah, so that was quite amazing. So being able to sort of spend that time in the workshop, watching chairs being made, and yeah, sort of talk about that information was sort of really valuable for me to know what to sort of bring back to my own workshop and what I should be focusing on with those hand tools.
Because you've got a chair making background as well, don't you, Pete?
Yeah, I do. I randomly made a Windsor chair when I was 15 years old. I did work experience with a local chair maker. It was more of an English style Windsor chair. And then in the last 10 years or so, I've been working with Glenn Rundle, and he makes American Windsor chairs. And so a lot of nearly all of my knowledge about Windsor chairs has come through him. And he has done extensive amount of travel to the US to work with Greg and Curtis Buchanan and a whole bunch of others over there. So, so that's where my interest has sort of been spiked again, is through that American Windsor chair making here with Glenn and assisting him on classes and things like that. So, yeah, so it's sort of dear to my heart, I think, those tools. And they're something that I think I really got my knowledge of hand tools by teaching on those classes. I'd spend a day before every class sharpening every tool, that we had to use for the whole week. And you really get to have a good understanding. If you sharpen every tool and you use every tool, you'll find out which ones are working and which ones aren't, and you sort of figure out, why that is.
So did you take some of your own tools with you for the trip?
Yes, I did. I took a few. I took Sloyd knives for everyone as gifts, everyone that I was going to be visiting. And I also took a couple of draw knives for a couple of the makers that had sort of gone out of their way to help me, organise my trip while I was over there. So, and that was really good. I had time to talk about the tools that I make and let people use them and get their opinions on them. Yeah, which was, I think, really valuable, a valuable sort of moment that I had while I was away, for sure.
Do you think that, like, was there any feedback from them that will, cause tweaks or overhauls or anything like that to your tools in the future?
Yeah, I think we had I think we're on the same page. The tools that I took over there, I still would not. I don't know if I would say any of my tools are perfect. I don't know if I'd ever be 100% happy with a tool that I'm making. There were things with those tools that I took that I felt were not quite right. And it was an interesting point to talk about, to see whether or not they thought the same thing about, certain elements of the tools. I did feel like I came away from there, ideally I would like to be replicating tools from 100 plus years ago. That's what I'd like to do. I feel like that was the sort of pinnacle of these hand tools.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I came away from that trip with a better understanding that I need to actually replicate the tools to the millimeter. If I pick up an antique tool and that's something I love the feel of, then I need to be replicating that down to the finest detail to get that same sort of spirit and that same sort of soul that tool offers, I think.
Mm-hmm. We were chatting about this on the phone the other day, and then sorry, I was pondering it afterwards, and I was thinking to myself, well, if they were that good, why don't those tools exist now? What do you think? What's caused that?
Yeah, I mean those factories that were making those tools, whether it be like Witherby or whoever the American companies were making those tools in that sort of heyday period. So between, let's say, the 1880s and the 1940s, 50s, maybe. They were really cranking those tools out. They were running reasonably big factories at that point. And I think towards the 1950s there, with the industrial, one of the industrial revolutions coming through, the workforce didn't require those tools anymore. Bigger machinery, bigger factories had started to come into play, and your average worker just didn't require them. So they fell out of favour, and those businesses, unfortunately, shut down. And it's the same. I know in Australia we feel like we're a bit hard done by. We don't have a massive stock of hand tools here, but in America they've got the same issue as well. Those businesses closed down a long time ago, and the people that are making them now are people more like myself, that are single business owners that are running a workshop by themselves, and they're trying to sort of hold up the market, I guess, for those tools at the moment.
There's definitely a resurgence towards handmade. There'll still be the IKEAs and all that sort of thing, but I think we're seeing a lot more people wanting to make their own or purchase from small makers. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's right. And that was something that was a kind of question that I had in my mind when I went traveling to see how these better makers that I was visiting are tackling this sort of problem, I suppose, of keeping up with the current market. And so that was really interesting. And just to see that, I was really happy to see that the makers that I visited weren't kind of cheating the system. They were doing it the old school way, with old school machines and, you know, traditional techniques, and it hadn't gone into that mass production style of making, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So where were the chair makers in the US?
So Greg Pennington's in Nashville, and Curtis Buchanan is in Jonesboro. And yeah, so they have stunning workshops. Curtis is just this cute little rustic kind of shed down the back of his veggie patch, and he has very little power tools there. He has 2 band saws and a lathe, and that's about it when it comes to power tools. So, and he doesn't like his band saws anyway. He's like, oh, I'm going to get rid of those. So he works in a really stripped down, basic kind of manner, which was just beautiful to see. You know, he's one of the best Windsor chair makers in the world, and known for that, you know, around the world. And you go to his workshop and it's just as simple as can be. Yeah, so that was really beautiful.
It makes me think that there's a guy I follow on Instagram. He calls himself a much Chinese carpenter.
Right.
And it's all done with hand tools, and
yeah,
his stuff's incredible.
Yeah, it's insane. And yeah, like Curtis is on Instagram. He's got a bit of stuff on there. And you can check out his workshop, and it's not smoke and mirrors. There's not a secondary workshop out the back somewhere, you know, that's full of hand tools, you know, it's full of power tools and thicknesses and all this other stuff. No, he just does it all there, and he has a really nice sort of philosophy on life and a philosophy on his work, that was really sort of special to learn about, I think. And it was, he doesn't like to rush. He likes to do things because he enjoys it. And so he likes to, let's say, scrub plane a board down to thickness because he likes to use that hand plane. Mm-hmm. Of course, it would be quicker to throw it through a thicknesser somewhere and just blitz it down to height, but he doesn't see it that way. There's no enjoyment in that for him. And so he likes to use those tools, and that's the way he runs his business. He doesn't, you know, if he gets an order for 6 chairs, he makes one at a time because he likes to make one chair at a time. He doesn't like to have to turn all the parts and, you know, do it in that fashion. So yeah, that was really nice to see.
Wow. So from there, where did you head to?
So after that, after the chair makers, I got into tool making, more into the tool making side of it. I went and stayed with Seth Gould, who is a tool maker in Bakersville, North Carolina. And so I had Seth Gould. Jason Lonnen is about a 20-minute drive from him. So I spent 3 days with Jason Lonnen, which was amazing. And then I headed up to, where did I go after that? Sorry, just thinking about this. To Johnstown in Pennsylvania. And I had a week class with a guy called Peter Ross, who's a blacksmith, and then a week with Pat Quinn at the Centre for Metal Arts in Johnstown. So
what did you do with Seth?
Seth, that was amazing. I'm sure everyone knows Seth, but if you don't know his work, jump on Instagram or online and check it out. His work is so inspirational. It's incredible. So
be prepared to have your mind blown.
Yeah. I don't think you'll be disappointed. If you've never seen his work before, it's a bit gobsmacking. So that was great. I was there at his place for 2 weeks with his family. He had an apartment up above the workshop, so I stayed up there, and we kind of just worked our way through some tools. He doesn't normally do edge tools, which is sort of more of my focus, but We did some hammers. What else did we do? Sorry, I'm just looking. Dividers. We did a hacksaw, like a traditional hacksaw. And I can possibly show you some of these at the end of the interview. Yeah, so that was great. It was really nice to see just the way he worked in his workshop. There was, I was kind of expecting if Seth does, quite big batches of tools, hammers and dividers and things like that. And as far as you can tell, there's just 20 or 30 of these identical things, they're amazing. And I got there thinking that he would be really sort of jig heavy, have everything so the bends were all the same and this and that. But it turns out that's not how he works at all. He just uses his hands and his eyes, and he's just super talented at replicating the same items over and over. And yeah, so that was an amazing couple of weeks spent there. And then in that 2 weeks, I did the odd day here and there with Jason Lonan, that I'm sure a lot of people will know of his tools as well. And that was another amazing experience, because he makes a range of tools that he makes all the tools that I make, draw knives, scorps, carving knives, plus others, adzes and all sorts of stuff. So, so to see his arrangement that he's got there, and he's got friends and family members that also work within his sort of business, all under the Jason Lonan Tools label, I guess.
Yep.
And yeah, it was really nice to see. They had a really great setup, and got to muck around on some big power hammers, and yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, he seems very family oriented.
He is. They have this. They have a really amazing sort of lifestyle setup. His workshop's literally, 30 or 40 meters across the road from his house, and they seem to put life and family come first, and work fits within that for them. But they have a really sort of strong community there, and they're all working for the same goal, I think, which is to make good quality tools and, make enough money to live a good life. So again, that was a really nice part of the trip that I did that I wasn't quite expecting, was learning all of those sort of, personal details about it, I suppose.
Do you think, because a number of the makers that you've mentioned so far do live quite balanced work-life balanced lives. Do you think that affected you at all?
Yeah, it is something that I've always struggled with here, being self-taught as a tool maker, being self-taught and also working on my own. You don't get a lot of you don't really have anyone to bounce ideas off and knowledge off like that. So it was really nice to see that all of those makers across the board were balancing, family life with their businesses, and pretty much putting them on an equal, equal plate, I suppose. So so that was really nice for me, knowing that when I come, as I come back to Australia after the trip, that I have to do the same thing. I drop my kids off in the morning, I pick them up after school. So, I have a very short sort of work day. But a lot of those guys do it as well, so, it's no excuse. You just have to be productive while you're in the workshop and, do the best you can, I guess.
Not get stuck on the phone to Chris from Wood Tamer for hours on end, hey?
Yeah, I should be sharpening something as we talk.
Do you think the relationships that you built while you were over there will be beneficial too going forward? Because are you able to bounce ideas off them in the future?
Yeah, I think so. I really do, and I would love to get back there. Um, Hopefully, maybe in a couple of years' time. I think it's a really important sort of part of it, and I've sort of had such good connection with all of those makers. I was so lucky. Some of these people I didn't know at all before I went. I'd had some communication with a few of them via Instagram and whatnot, but it was real lucky dip sort of stuff. But yeah, I made such sort of good connections with them. I think, yeah, they're definitely friendships that'll last, for a lot longer. So,
So from Jason and Seth, where'd you head off to?
yeah, so up to Johnstown in Pennsylvania, to the Centre for Metal Arts up there. And again, if you want to look at some amazing stuff, jump on their Instagram page and check out Centre for Metal Arts. It used to be the old Bethlehem Steelworks. And so Centre for Metal Arts has moved into some of the buildings there, and they have access to a huge big octagon building there with some of the original power hammers that were there used for the steelworks. And these things are just beyond the size of these things. Some of them are like 5-ton power hammers. They're insane. So, they might be 4 meters tall, 5 meters tall. And so they have access to them and are restoring all of these power hammers, and have a beautiful big teaching workshop as well. So, yeah, so I got to stay up there for a couple of weeks in their accommodation. And I had a class with a guy called Peter Ross, who has worked at Colonial Williamsburg, which is a sort of open-air museum for most of his career. And so he's kind of considered one of the experts in traditional blacksmithing from, I think, Williamsburg is set in 1760 or something. And so his role there was to make all of the tools and everything that they needed for the place in the blacksmith shop. So he would be making scissors for the tailors, and he would be making, shovels for the gardeners, and everything had to be done as though it was 1760 or whatever the year was. So, yeah, so that was amazing. He was an incredible sort of bank of knowledge. You could ask him about all sorts of stuff. He sort of had opinions on everything. So, and we did a tailor shears class. So, yeah, which was amazing for a week. So, yeah, so that was really cool. And then I had a one-on-one class with a guy called Pat Quinn, and he's the manager of the Centre for Metal Arts there. So that was amazing.
And what were you doing with him?
We did a range of stuff. He focuses a lot on tongs. When Centre for Metal Art moved into the old Bethlehem Steelworks, it came with there must be like 50 or 60 pallets worth of the original tongs that they would use for the while they were in the steelworks. So he's sort of made it a bit of a passion project of his own to, through trial and error, figure out how those tongs are made and how to replicate that exact form. So that's one of his sort of passions. So we did tong making, a few hammer heads. We also made a swing out seat for your workbench. And yeah, and that was it. So, but that was incredible. You know, if anyone's got any aspirations to go overseas and learn blacksmithing, that is a definite go-to.
Mm-hmm. So what would you do you have any highlights, both on the clock and off the clock?
Yeah, I mean, a big highlight for me, sort of off the clock, I guess, would be when I was at Seth's. Seth moved to Bakersville in North Carolina because he had done some time. He did 3 years, I think, as a resident at Penland School of Craft, which is just up the road. And so we got to go up there a couple of times and hang out in the metal working studios there. There was an intensive class running there. So they do 8-week intensive blacksmithing classes. They also have glass. Again, if you're looking for some inspiration, have a look at Penland School of Craft. It's just incredible. Yeah, and so we got to go up there and hang out and see what these students had been creating over 8 weeks. And that was really inspiring for me. You know, I teach classes, but generally they'll just be a weekend class. Mm-hmm. And seeing what people could achieve over 8 weeks was just mind-blowing, you know, and the amount of progression that they had achieved over that time and how comfortable they all of a sudden were in a metalworking studio. Yeah, that was really inspiring. So I'm looking at the moment and I'm sort of planning slowly to try and run longer term classes over at the Rare Trade Centre in Ballarat, and see if we can get classes that run, even if it's 7 days, like a 7-day intensive that focus on, you know, traditional hand tools and edge tools. So that's something that I've come back with that I really want to try and push there and see if I can get that to work. And I think it'd be good for a lot of people that are dabbling in blacksmithing or bladesmithing to have a week intensive like that to sort of so to encourage them to potentially dive into the hand tool making. You know, it's something that's really lacking here in Australia. So
that correct me if I'm wrong. That was part of the Churchill program, was that you were meant to bring back knowledge to share with others. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. That's if anyone's ever looking to, you know, do a trip and apply for a Churchill Fellowship, the idea is that you're applying for that to travel overseas to learn from other the people at the sort of top of your field, because you can't get the knowledge here in Australia. You've exhausted the knowledge that you can sort of build here in Australia. And you need to travel. And the idea is that you kind of bring that knowledge back from overseas and in some way share it with, with the public here. So, yeah, this would be the kind of first step for me in giving back, I guess, after the Churchill trip. And I loved, you know, teaching a 2-day class, you know, if it's a Sloyd knife class or something like that. But I do find that quite often the students on those classes are just there because it's a fun thing to do for the weekend. You know, they're not planning on going home and setting up a blacksmith forge. So it would be nice to be able to try and invite in people that are already blacksmithing, that maybe just need to have a slight change in direction to find their sort of their market within the industry, I think. So yeah, I think that'll be really good.
That's awesome. So I think we've covered off most things that we were planning on chatting about. How'd you go slotting back into family life after being away for so long? I
It
bet
was
that's a big
tough.
shot.
It was tough. It was really tough. I know the Churchill trip was not meant to be a holiday, but for me, it kind of felt like a holiday. It was 6 weeks of blacksmithing. You know, it was an absolute dream. So coming back to family life was a little bit tricky. And I think I came back with, you know, I was on the plane coming back and I'm writing lists of all the things I'm going to achieve in the next month. And I hit the ground here and realized that it's probably more like 2 years that I'll roll those ideas out. But, you know, I think you know, as we spoke about earlier, I did get to learn a lot from those people, those makers that are also juggling businesses and their families.
Mhm.
So I think that gave me a fresh perspective on my own situation here for sure.
I know that you're a very involved dad, so I know what it's like juggling work and fatherhood or parenthood.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like 80% of life gets sort of chewed up by, you know, the admin of life, or, you know, whatever, you know, you're either running kids around or I don't know. There's always stuff to do, right? So yeah, I think it just gave me a good understanding that while I'm in the workshop, I need to be really productive and have a really good plan, you know, on what I'm aiming to get done for the day or the week or whatever it is.
Have you found, since you've got back and you've got back into the flow of things, is there stuff that you learned while you're away that you've found yourself implementing already?
Yeah, there is for sure. You know, there's some small things that I've started already, whether it's a small jig for grinding, you know, grinding blades or small things like that. I think the growth of my business, I think what the trip will have given me is direction, you know, in terms of the way my business will grow into the future. Not a great deal has changed in my workshop in the last couple of months. You know, it still looks exactly the same. So, but I think over time, it's given me a really clear direction. Yeah, so I think that's been the biggest win out of the trip for sure.
Mhm. I was actually wondering, speaking of the workshop, if you'd be interested in giving us a bit of a tour and maybe showing us some of the stuff that you made while you're away. And
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We do that now?
yeah, that'd be great.
All
If
right.
that works for you.
Yeah. Okay. Let's have a little look here. Sorry, I'm all over the joint. All right. So we'll start with the little sign up the top. This is my little sign for the Lost Trades Fair. Nice little Sloyd knife.
Has it got an edge?
And what's that?
Has it got an edge on it?
Well, yeah, a blunt one at that. Let me just get a bit of stuff out of the way. Sorry. Yeah, so I've got nice big windows here, which give me really good light. They are facing east, so you get really beautiful light in the mornings, but the natural light in here drops off sort of dramatically in the afternoons, unfortunately. So yeah, so I have huge range of tools stuck against the window there. These are some of the tools. A lot of the stuff still isn't quite finished off. Some of the tools I made while I was away, though, you know, hacksaw with Seth Gould, and you can see we made the little wing nuts and threaded the rod and the whole works. And so that's forged out of a single sort of bar of steel. So that was a fun little project.
Yep.
Little hammerheads made with Seth and a pair of dividers there. I haven't got the scissors I made with Peter Ross, but that's one of the practice blanks.
Mhm.
I would love to try scissor making again at some point, but it's a fairly in-depth process, so I'll have to set aside a bit of time for myself. And some other bits and pieces that I made with Pat Quinn. Yeah, so around the workshop, drill press. I've got a small incline press here, which I use sometimes. I don't always use for my tools. It's like a sort of rudimentary power hammer, I guess. Not quite as versatile as a power hammer, but. And then looking around the workshop, I'm setting up a formwork here to be filled for a power hammer that I have out the back. So that was one of the things I got started on as soon as I got back, because I realised how power hammer reliant all the makers are, that I visited overseas. So back over to the front door, bit of stuff on the wall. My daughter's artwork for me, which I love. This is my little room. Used to be an old office in this building, but which I've got a nice lathe set up in there. So that's where all my handles are done. And back over through here is my little grinding room. And it just sort of helps keep the dust at bay. Yeah, there you go. That's about it.
Thanks for sharing.
No worries. Not a problem.
All right. Well, I really appreciate you giving us your time today, Pete.
Pleasure, mate. Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I've enjoyed hearing about your whole trip.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.